Greetings, folks. If you're someone who teaches classes or works doing marketing or something like that, you might find yourself in the situation where you have to frequently produce PowerPoint slides for presentations. I've recently come across this really interesting open source app called Presenton that uses large language models, so called AI, to generate presentations for you. Let's take a look at the GitHub page for the project here, shall we? As you can see, it's under very active development. There's been several releases even since I discovered this about a week ago. It is still branded as a beta, and indeed there are some rough edges, but I'll talk about that in a bit. If we scroll down here, we see that, like all good open source applications, this runs in Docker. Docker is your best friend if you're interested in open source and self-hosting. So very glad to see it having a Docker config here. And I'll talk more about how to actually get this up and running in a bit. It does also give you very clear instructions for what configurations and API keys you'll need. An API key is basically you can think of it like a password that lets you have access to a service, but access purely programmatically rather than through the graphical user interface in your browser. So because this application uses these LLMs to help design PowerPoint slides, you have to provide a API key for whatever LLM you want to use. And they have some options here, OpenAI, Google, but they also are compatible with Ollama, which is a tool for self-hosting LLMs on your computer. And I'll compare and contrast the performance using a much smaller locally run Ollama model versus using one of these cloud LLM tools like OpenAI's ChatGPT, and we'll see how it fares using those two options. Interestingly, this project also uses the LLM to design pictures that accompany your slides. But if you're using a smaller model that doesn't have the capability to generate images, it integrates with Pexels, which is a website that distributes royalty-free, license-free photographs. And if we continue scrolling down the page here, you'll see that Presenton comes with its own API so that you can programmatically ask for and create these presentations. Now, before I show you the software in action, I want to talk for a minute about the monetization strategy here. We all know that open source has a big problem with monetization and sustainability. If you're producing and distributing software for free, how do you actually keep your lights on? It's a big problem in the space. I love how this development team is solving that. As you can see here, they are selling a hosted version of the software they have developed. So if you don't want to self-host, you don't want to deal with getting API keys and running Docker and all of this stuff, which is not that complicated, but maybe it's just something you're not interested in. You want to just have a service working in your browser. You can pay a monthly fee, $5 a month, to have access to this service. I think that's a great solution to this problem of offering the open source tool for free and then charging people if they want a hosted, managed instance of that tool. So that's really cool to see them pursuing this business model for their software. So if we jump over to the terminal and my file browser here, we can see if we can get the software up and running. In my .env file here, or .env environment file here, I have put all of the API keys. There's instructions online for how to get an API key for OpenAI and for Pexels. That's a pretty straightforward process. You can follow the instructions provided on the websites of those companies. I like to run everything in Docker through Docker Compose. So as you can see here, I've created a Docker Compose file based off of the run commands, the Docker run commands that were provided in the GitHub repository. this is something you can ask ChatGPT to do, to like format the run command into a compose file. I can also put this compose file in the description somewhere, but that's what I have here. And then I'm going to run it. So I had to get the syntax right here. I am using Podman instead of Docker, but those are mostly interchangeable. I'm sure the sysadmin people will get mad at me for saying that, but I'm going to run this command here, podman compose. The file is the presenton.yaml file that I have created with the Docker compose syntax, up and then -d, so detached. Don't show me anything in the terminal, just run it. So now if we pop over into the browser, the software should be running on localhost port 5000. The port can be changed in the Docker Compose file if you want, but the default is port 5000. So you can literally enter in localhost 5000 into your browser, and you should enter right into the software here. So what you can do is upload a file with all of your notes or all the content you want to turn into the presentation. You can add additional information up top in that other window there. Then you hit next. You can edit the content, but then you go ahead and hit next and it'll start generating a presentation. This does take some time if you're running it locally, and even if you're running it in the cloud, it's definitely not a super fast process. Once it's done, you can select a theme. It'll give you an outline of all the slides it's created, and then you generate the final presentation. So let's take a look at the results. This is the presentation it generated using a local model. It was Gemma 312B. There are a few issues here. It has drawn in these sort of stock photos from Pexels, but as you can see, the text on the slides is cut off. There's some weird, you know, artifacts, you might say, from the LLM in terms of how it was generating things and the text that it chose. But, this is a okay starting point for further refinement, definitely. If we pull up the presentation I generated using ChatGPT, as you can see, it has these AI photos here, which are kind of cool and creative. I know some people don't like the style of AI art, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun. Definitely more interesting than the stock photos. And in this case, it does usually manage to get full, complete sentences on the slides. It even does some bolding and highlighting here to emphasize certain words. If we keep scrolling through here, it's still a very basic presentation. It's certainly not what I would design if I was doing this myself. But once again, this is a beta project. It's a very experimental technique here, so that's okay. I certainly think this is a great starting point, and depending on your audience, if you were really in a pinch, you could throw this up with the exception of some issues here. Like, I don't know why it's created this chart where it's putting the number of days in the Berlin airlift on a bar graph. And I don't know how it's come up with this number of 57 for Korean War troops. Maybe it's looking at 5.7 million. It didn't quite understand that. I don't know. But definitely a lot better than the one I generated on a local model. Though there is some clipping and formatting issues here. But once again, certainly a strong starting point for further refinement. Slight postscript here. This is one of the really cool things about open source projects. you can actually go and see the code. And so I'm no developer, but I was poking around in here, and it looks like this is the prompt that is actually being sent to the LLM to generate the content for the slides. So maybe if some of y'all are expert prompt engineers out there, you could improve this to get better results, or you might be able to get the same benefits of using the software by just putting this prompt into whatever LLM you prefer and manually putting the output onto your slides. So that's Presenton for you. Definitely rough around the edges, but really cool, really interesting. And so, as the meme goes, we will watch your career with great interest. The developers are very actively working on this. They've raised a bunch of issues, including one for dealing with the clipping and the other formatting issues that you get when you're using an Olama model. So yeah, definitely a project to keep an eye on, and I look forward to seeing where it goes. Well, folks, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if I should make more showcases like this, or if I should do more on the nitty gritty of self hosting and getting API keys and working with Docker Compose. Yeah, let me know what's helpful. Take care, folks.